So you're getting an exclusive cut of this piece of work that's coming out over the next couple of weeks.
My name's Robbie. All right, I'm going to be coaching you today. We're going to do a session that's going to have lots of opportunities to attack, score goals, defend and score goals, and hopefully we're going to try and get it as competitive as possible. All right, through the session, I want your football ability to be as high as possible. Yeah, so bring your qualities as players that you have individually, but as collectively as a team as well. Lots of high tempo intensity work from you, because this is going to be a quick session, by the way. Yeah, it's going to be a really quick session.
So when we're talking about allowing the players a voice, there has to be a framework around which we're going to allow the players' voice. So let's say, for example, if we're saying at this stage we need to know what the players think or what they know. So it might be right at the start of the session, we might go, right, we need to know what they know, because this session is going to be about, say, for example, let's use the old one, playing out from the back. What do the players actually know about playing from the back? What do they think playing out the back means? So if we start asking them, well, what does it mean to you? And start to speak to them about their position. Say, for example, if you're, say, one of the fullbacks, what does that look like for you as a fullback? What are the things that you might need to look at? And then we start to hear from them, and they start to tell us what it is they think their roles are.
And I think giving players ownership at a young age from experience is really important. I think the skill, and Pete will enlarge on this as well, is in how you do it, age specific. So for young players, using Robbie's example there, where he asked the players to select teams, we thought, if you did that with a group of 7-8-year-olds, you could end up with very one-sided teams. Their enthusiasm and age may. So we think the skill as a coach is in how do you frame that ownership? How do you question that ownership? What questions do you ask, and how do you ask them? So I think directly, Nick, we do feel that even at 6-7 years of age, giving players some ownership, giving them that voice and choice is still relevant and really quite important.
Sometimes we're scared of that silence, aren't we, Rich? We're scared of that thing where they haven't said anything, so they don't know. But actually, they might just need a little bit of time to gather their thoughts. And even if they don't answer it at the time, it's always, I think it's great to come back to it. So they might not be able to answer you straight away, but you then go, I tell you what, let's go and play a little bit, and then we'll come back to that. And that's where the learning happens, doesn't it? Because they start to understand that they're that they don't have to have all the answers, and they don't have to have all the answers right there and then. And it makes it easy for them to talk after that, doesn't it?
I think also, as Pete's alluded to, Robbie's use of a framework. So he asked them to pick teams, and then he was like, just wait a minute. Let me just frame that a little bit more for you in terms of what he wanted. I didn't want lopsided teams, unfair teams, did he? Because he knew that the games they were going to play, they'd get more enjoyment from that. So I think there are some really subtle key messages for us all listening in within that short, video around the importance of giving your players that voice and choice and bringing them on board.
I like players to have responsibility, to think about what we're asking them to do, to have an opinion on the way that we're asking them to play and the way that we're asking them to train. I think if they have some ownership of what's going on, then that's going to help them to make better decisions on the field, and also probably to buy in more to the way that we're trying to progress. So certainly senior players would have a very good view on what's brought them success. They're the ones playing the game. So if I don't listen to their opinions and their views, then we're missing a piece of evidence and opinion that can make us a better team. Great messages in that video for Pete and myself, having watched it, over the last few weeks. I think for us, the tone of voice that we use, and that's been referred to in the chat as well. So Gareth's tone of voice, I'm sure you'll agree, just shows empathy and care and interest and respect in people generally. And I think there was some great examples in Robbie's clip
as well, where he uses a different voice, a different tone, a different speed as well. But all that is relevant to the group, to the individuals. So I think there's some really subtle key messages in there for us all to consider around how do we tailor that to suit individual players.
You know, it's not just about saying, okay, what do you think? Because to be quite honest, they might not have any thoughts about what you've just done. They may have just enjoyed the session. But, you know, once you start to create that environment and you create that framework where you're saying your voice as a player matters, then you then start to see how you increase your voice. So it's really about everything, that the player feels that they're not this person who's just being talked at all the time. They feel that they are somebody who can actually add something to the session. You know, a very, really quick example of this, a player who I was working with last season. He said to me, "I've got a really brilliant formation for you." And I said, "What is it?" And he said, it's 4-3-3, but in the top three, one of our players drops into the midfield every so often, collects the ball, and then just starts to spray it so that the two fullbacks can get up and join in. And he'd thought about it. You know, it looks like he'd really thought about it. And I said, actually, that's really good. That's fantastic. And then I started to ask him a few questions about it. And he'd come back with a couple of answers. And I say, all right, okay, well, what happens if we lose the ball and blah? And we started to have that discussion. And he found out that actually he was able to communicate all this stuff. And I thought, what made him decide to come and ask to tell me that, you know, he'd got this great new formation? And I thought, well, maybe me and the other coaches had given that impression that they could come up with those ideas, which was for us was great. You know, that this player could come along and give those suggestions.
I'm considering a touch restriction for the team of 6. How many touches would you like to play with in the first game?
3. Yeah.
So team of 6, you're on 3 touches. And if you're scoring that side, you need to score in between the post and the mannequin. Okay, so it's pretty challenging. So my question is, would you like to change the positioning of the mannequins if you're shooting that way? So it's up to the oranges to choose then. Go on, quickly, go and do it then. Do what you need to do to those mannequins to score more goals.
One team had an overload, so they had, you know, obviously more players, and Amy gave them a choice around number of touches.
Yep.
And we spoke very much around, there was a risk element to that, Pete, as well, isn't there? Of
yes,
and putting yourself because what would Amy have done? What would you do? What would we do if they'd have come back with an answer that you didn't want?
It was Amy kind of took a chance there, but I think she kind of knew because of the players that she had. But if the players turned around and said, "Oh, we want 100 touches," then all of a sudden you have got a problem. So again, as we talked about earlier about framing, if we framed it and we said, right, okay, you can have any, because especially if we know our players and our players might actually go out and they might try and stretch the boundaries, we might say, right, you can have any touches from 1 to 6, and you can choose how many touches you want, but it's got to be in the range of between 1 and 6. So then you then ask them questions about, you know, is that going to challenge you enough? Do you think that it's going to be fair on the other team, etc., etc.? So you can ask additional questions after that as well.
A practice, an arrival activity, really, that we've used a lot over the last 5 years. There's some comments in the chat box along similar lines around arrival activities. So the thinking here, and again, we're sharing this for you so you can download all of this. But what we've used at Sheffield United at the girls' RTC for the last 5 years, we effectively have player-led weeks. And we do this with the younger players right through to the under-16s. And part of that player-led week is, as they arrive for training, we allocate a period of time usually around 20 minutes. But that can sort of from arrival. So as players arrive, if they're 15 minutes early, we just let them go and set. And that diagram just shows we just put all the equipment at the side of the pitches. We don't put anything out, lay anything out. And then as the players arrive, we'll have a framework around what it is we're looking for. So we might put them in pairs. We might put them in groups of 3. We might put them in odd numbers. We might have just a group of 5. But we'll have an idea and a theme and space that we want them. So we do keep within a framework, but we then ask the players to go and set up their own practice. There's always going to be some players that probably need some support and guidance and thoughts and ideas. So I think the role of the coaches is back to what we said earlier, is around your observation skills. So how quickly can you see that someone might be uncomfortable with it? They might not quite understand or not. And then how can you very subtly go in and just support them and give them then the benefit of your experience and know-how, in terms of maybe giving them a few little guiders or pointers. Don't be afraid to do this with young players. When I was working in the boys' academy football many years ago, we had under-9 groups running match days, academy match days at under-9s. But it took a while. It did take a little while to build the confidence and the knowledge. And then there's the parents as well, of course. We'll talk about them later. Yeah, we can talk about them in a bit. But that's a key strand, particularly for those obviously working in the grassroots game. I think they're fundamental to get their buy-in and support to this type of player voice and choice.
This practice here is starts off as a little sort of 2 players in the middle. So it's just a small-sided practice. And basically what's happening is there's 2 balls going on, and the 2 players in the middle, what they're doing is they're receiving a ball from one of the players in the corners, and they've got to work their way around the square, passing to each player, getting a touch, moving off, finding another person, finding somebody else who doesn't have a ball. So this is a piece around communicating whilst you're actually playing. The idea is, can you pass a ball to 3 out of the 4 players and then score in one of the mini goals, say, for example. Some of the rules around this might be that you can't pass back to the same player twice. So you've got to go to 3 different players. So now we're looking at movement. We're looking at the possibility of, say, for example, bouncing the ball off of a player who's on the side. You might even get the players to come out the boxes and play a shorter pass. All those sort of things you can do with this practice. But what you're really trying to do is get the players to communicate with each other in a way that helps them to be able to complete the task. And this goes into this idea of, let's say, for example, you've got 2 balls going on, you've got lots of bodies moving around, people not colliding with each other, the balls not hitting each other. Those sort of things come into this practice. So if we just have a little look at it. So here's where it's just a simple pass. The players in the squares, they just come out, create an angle. The balls keep moving. The player on the inside should be asking for the ball, asking where they want it to be played, etc., etc.
Right, into the third area of which we've kind of quite seamlessly segued in there, is around what's people's thoughts around key coaching considerations when you're working with your players?
Especially with younger players, is I say, right, what we're going to do is we're going to have 6 rules. 3 rules are your rules and 3 rules are my rules. That's all there are, 6 rules. Now, what happens is the players will give their go away and they'll talk about their 3 rules. They'll come back and we'll write that up. Then I'll give my 3 rules. But the thing about it is that we have to agree on each other's rules. So if I might say that their rule one, it might be that they're allowed to do to foul this player 6 times in a game or whatever. And I said, well, no, that's not safe. That's not fair. I might say you've always got to have your tracksuit trousers on for all training sessions, but that might not be. And they might turn around and say, well, what about if it gets hot? I'll get too hot. Okay, fine, no problem. We'll take that one out. And then we negotiate. And so we've got our 6 rules that we all agree on. And then that frames if you like, our environment from there.
I think something else me and Pete have talked a lot about in preparation for tonight is around, we mentioned it earlier, around including parents in these conversations. So if we're going to have player-led weeks, if we're going to have players having a voice and a choice, I think our performance is always going to be on those peaks and troughs, and therefore parents really buying into that development model of, we want your daughter or your son to learn the game, to improve as a person and a player. Therefore, we're giving them choice, a voice. We're giving them like ownership, autonomy. But sometimes they're going to get it wrong. It's going to go wrong, and not having them parents trying to influence, the children, particularly around, why isn't the coach just telling them what to do? Why aren't you just telling them? I think the importance of that parent communication, would you agree, Pete, is critical, and how we do that as a coach and how we involve parents without, just handing it over to them as well is really important.
So I just done it, I just paused. I stopped the clock, we're halfway through, I've come to the board. So when you time out, when you pause, you can choose one of these 4 things that can help you win the game. Okay, so Blues, like, let's just imagine you've just paused and you've come over to this board. What do you feel like you need now?
Amy demonstrated there for us so many of the things that we've tried to talk about tonight around the environment that she'd clearly create. There was a really nice, relaxed environment in the group. Her tone of voice, her use of questioning, her use of a board, her use of choices. So she's giving the players a choice. She was also giving them a voice. She did it in groups of 3. So the players didn't probably feel isolated, but felt a bit supported. So I think there's just so many very subtle, really clever coaching techniques in that short 3-minute clip that really tries, I think, to bring into, a clip of what we're trying to say, Pete, isn't it? Around the importance of creating these opportunities where we're not just asking questions, but we're really giving players decisions to make and choices to make, really.